I hope that organizing the class according to the scientific method makes sense for the topic of the course, but that emphasis also helps us think about the class in the context of the discipline as a whole. Psychology is defined as a science. There are numerous professional organizations representing the subfields of psychology, and many of those organizations host a conference where research is presented, as well as publish academic journals reporting empirical research. The two largest professional organizations for psychology as a whole, APS and APA, emphasize research and science in their mission statements. APS is actually an abbreviation for Association for Psychological Science. In 2005, members voted to change the name from the American Psychological Society to emphasize the scientific nature of the discipline. This might be the first research methods class you've taken, but I have a feeling that you're familiar with the basic ideas. We all conduct informal research on a regular basis. Should I buy this product? How can I make the best cup of coffee? What helps me sleep? What foods taste the best together? Each of these questions represent the start of a research process. Your questions might be about different topics, but I have a feeling you ask yourself research-related questions every day. This class helps us define and refine our approaches to carry out more formal studies. Aside from our informal research, this class also relates to ideas you've probably learned about in other classes. In general psychology or educational psychology, you probably had a unit that provided an overview of research methods, and you learned about knowledge generated through research. In statistics class, you learned about some of the processes we use in carrying out research. We'll also build on what you learned, or provide context for what you will learn, in other general education classes and your institutional requirements. This class includes a lot of writing, using what you've learned in English and composition classes. We'll use Microsoft Word and other software, drawing on knowledge related to the information technology requirement. Psychological research is also based on the same scientific method you learned about in various science classes. Like I said, I have a feeling you've learned about the scientific method in other classes, or carried out the steps without knowing what you were doing. Psychological science uses the same steps. Note, though, that the way we talk about the scientific method in psychology might be a little bit different than how it's typically presented, especially the steps with the asterisk. Sometimes the step labeled "See what we know" is called research, and the step labeled "Design and conduct a study" is called conduct an experiment. I made those changes to help reduce confusion as we move forward. Your previous experience might give you the impression that conducting research means reading papers, articles, and books about a topic. That's an important part of the process, but in psychology, it's only one step. Similarly, experiments are one type of research, but not the only type. This class will actually focus on research designs that are not experimental. The experimental and non-experimental distinction is important because each approach provides a different perspective and influences how we can interpret the findings. Given that, it's important to use the word experiment very precisely. If you're talking about the process of gathering data in general, the term research will be more accurate. Those details are important, but only because they qualify our knowledge. They impact what we actually know. I thought about that idea in this class when I read the first section of an essay called Damage by Wendell Berry. He wrote, "I have a steep wooded hillside that I wanted to be able to pasture occasionally, but it had no permanent water supply. About halfway to the top of the slope there's a narrow bench on which I thought I could make a small pond. I hired a man with a bulldozer to dig one. He cleared away the trees and then formed the pond, cutting into the hill on the upper side, piling the loosened dirt and a curving earthwork on the lower. The pond appeared to be a success. Before the bulldozer quit work, water had already begun to seep in. Soon there was enough to support a few head of stock. To heal the exposed ground, I fertilized it and sowed it with grass and clover. We had an extremely wet fall and winter, with the usual freezing and thawing. The ground grew heavy with water and soft. The earthwork slumped. A large slice of the wooded floor on the upper side slipped down into the pond. The trouble was a familiar one. Too much power, too little knowledge. The fault was mine. I was careful to get expert advice, but this only exemplifies what I already knew. No expert knows everything about every place, not even anything about any place. If one's knowledge of one's whereabouts is insufficient, if one's judgment is unsound, then expert advice is of little use. Those ideas are similar to the underlying logic for this class. He emphasizes the idea of knowledge, just as we will. There's a wealth of powerful information available, but we will work to understand what information means. In the process, we'll also recognize the boundaries of our own knowledge and that of others, so that we know when we need to seek another source or avoid making a claim. Together, this helps us think about why it's important to understand the difference between research and general and an experiment. It helps us understand the limitations of perspective and the use of information.